In this video, we'll be talking about triggers and timers within myCNC. And to reach the settings for those, go into your main settings, your configuration, inputs, output sensors, and then into triggers and timers. So this is the window that we'll be working with. First of all, let's take a look at the triggers. Triggers are effectively some sort of an action that occurs whenever an input is quote unquote triggered, or whenever it is activated or deactivated. So here we are monitoring some sort of an input, and we expect some sort of an action to take place whenever there's a change in status for that input. So here I already have a button connected to input number 29. As you can see here, whenever I am pressing it, it goes from on to off. So not pressed, pressed, not pressed, pressed. And we'll be using this particular input for our example. So I'll enable it. I have my input number as input 29. And next I'm looking at the trigger. So this can be either rising edge or falling edge. Effectively, this is because the program doesn't actually look for the state of the input, so it doesn't actually look at whether the input is on or off. It doesn't check continuously, but rather it looks for the change in the status. So if the input is switching from off to on, then it will be a rising edge, and if it's switching from on to off, it will be a falling edge. And since by default my input 29 is on, that means when I'm pressing it, the change will be from on to off, which means I'm using a falling edge trigger here. Next you have a setting for your output number. This is a legacy setting from earlier versions of the software, and it is not used at all in software versions as of the time of publishing this video. So I'm currently on version 1.88 4543. If you are on this version, or even if you're a little bit behind, do not worry about this. This is a legacy option that you should not be using. Next we have the slot. And the slot is actually the action that's going to be taking place whenever we press the button or whenever a trigger is activated, generally speaking. And this can be either a simple stop program, or it can be one of the assigned triggers. So what are these triggers? So what is Triggo for example? Well, to put it simply, it's just a PLC that we have in our hardware PLC list. So here I already have some sort of a trigger 1 and trigger 4. And for those of you who are familiar with probe sensors, trigger 4 is what we often used whenever we're using our probe sensor, which you can recognize as a pretty similar sort of an application. So when an input is activated, you'd like to stop your movement. So here, let's go and check whether we have everything set up. Let's save this, and now let's go back and try to run this program. So here I'll be running it, and at a certain point I will be pressing my button. So now, and as you can see, I have an error message on the screen that says probe sensor collision. Since I'm using trigger number 4, which is already used for my probe sensor, it already has these windows pre-set up. You can of course change the pop-up message, or you can use a different trigger, etc. And last but not least, in these settings we have the trigger, filter, or delay. So this is simply your filter to prevent things like jitter and noise. So if you have a lot of jitter or noise on your machine that is activating your trigger for some reason, you may want to experiment and play around with your filter value to bring it up a little bit. Alright, now that we've covered the triggers, let's go over the timers within myCNC. So this is a set of 4 timers, which are very useful when you'd like to have the controller time a certain timer rather than your computer. So this offloads some timing processes from your computer to your controller directly. And this is very useful in applications such as coolant or your flood, mist, etc. Here we simply have our enable and disable toggle again. We'll enable our timer number 0. Next you have the output pin, which you are going to be repeatedly activating or toggling on and off. Here I'll be using, let's say, output pin number 9. And next you have the pulse time and the pause time. So this is the value in milliseconds within which the output is going to be on, and this will be the pause time. So let's say this will be 800 and this will be 600 perhaps milliseconds. Next we simply save this and we can check the results in our diagnostics window. And as you can see, I now have my output 9 being toggled on and off. So again, if you have some sort of a process that requires you to continuously have an output being toggled, again, such as with your mist applications for your coolant, this is a very useful tool within the myCNC controller. So I hope this covers it for the triggers and timers. If you would like to find out more about these, you can visit our documentation website at docs.pvautomation.com. Thank you for watching.